We are just a day away from Nebraska and Illinois. Some numbers and figures to know as we preview the whole thing coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Thursday. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me as always. We are going to get into some key items to victory for Nebraska later in the show. Tomorrow, we'll be making our picks on several pieces of information related to the Nebraska-Illinois game, plus games nationally and around the Big Ten. Big week in the Big Ten this week as conference play gets started in full. And we'll do some mailbag questions. So send those to us today. We'll put a call out in the YouTube comments and on Twitter. But before any of that today, we wanted to talk about some numbers. We wanted to talk about some trends and some statistics that maybe don't look the best for Nebraska football. But with that comes opportunity for Nebraska to reverse some things, to break some streaks, to end some trend lines here on Friday night as the Fighting Illini of Illinois come storming into Memorial Stadium for the first ever Friday night game, Friday night at Memorial Stadium under the lights. We've had Friday games, as I realized this week, but I believe it's the first time on Friday night. So, okay, two little facts here, indisputable facts. Matt Rhule is 2-19 as a head coach against ranked competition. That goes from his 1 year at Nebraska to his 3 years at Baylor and his 4 years at Temple. That's against teams ranked in the AP top 25 at the time of kickoff. Nebraska has lost 24 consecutive games against ranked opponents, dating to a win against Oregon in 2016. Do either of these figures mean anything on Friday night when kickoff arrives at 7 p.m.?
Well, without looking at it too deeply, I would assume that 2-19 against ranked teams, almost all of it comes as a pretty gigantic underdog.
Right.
At the very least, a little one.
He's been a big underdog most of the time. Yeah.
That would be like, I was trying to look because I've tracked all this stuff through the various game logs, but very few times in Rhule's career as he played a ranked team and been ranked. Actually, this may be the first time. One of the first times.
You keep talking about that, and I will check.
I mean, you'd have to go back to Baylor. You'd have to go back to Baylor probably in 18. They played in the conference title game. They were underdogs there.
Baylor in 2019 was ranked 8th when it played Oklahoma in the conference championship game. Oklahoma was 6th. That was a 30-23 loss. And then Baylor lost to 5th ranked Georgia. In the Sugar Bowl, 26-14.
They were underdogs in both of those games.
Oh, for sure. Against OU and Georgia. I mean, those are respectable games. Yeah, those are respectable games. The year before that, in 2018, Rhule's second year at Baylor, Baylor was never in the rankings that year. So just the 2019 games, his last 2 games at Baylor, they were ranked. At Temple, he's playing teams like Notre Dame. So he was a heavy underdog in those games. And So what are you going to say, that the 2-19 doesn't matter?
Yeah, I am going to say that. I don't think it matters that much. I mean, it's I don't think it's very emblematic of their they don't get up for big games or whatever. They've been massively under talented in giant games, or games in which the other team was ranked. So they're ranked, they're playing against a ranked team, and Nebraska is a greater than a touchdown favorite. So all those, those things don't really apply to this game. 24 against ranked opponents. I don't know that really, 24 in a row losses against ranked opponents, which is just insane. I don't know, like for almost the same reasons, I don't know that really applies here either. I don't think Illinois is that good. I don't think Illinois is good enough to be ranked. To be honest with you.
Okay, I'm pulling that quote out.
Yeah, sorry, you put that on Twitter. I don't know. I think they've done a nice job so far this season. Obviously, Nebraska's done they're not much better from a resume perspective, but I just watch them and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. There's some warts there. So I'm gonna say no, that those numbers really don't mean anything going into this one.
Okay, so Temple in 2015, he played 2 ranked on ranked games. Notre Dame, Temple was ranked 21st. Notre Dame was ranked 9th. That was a 24-20 Notre Dame win. And then later that year in December, which would have been the AAC championship game, 20th ranked Temple played number 17 Houston and lost 24-13. So 0-4. Yeah, underdogs in both those games. 0-4 as a ranked versus ranked head coach. His wins against ranked opponents also came in AAC games during that time at Temple. So yeah, I'm with you. That one doesn't matter. I think it's a different situation here at Nebraska in 2024. There's not a lot that's applicable from any of that to what we're going to see on the field Friday night. The 24 consecutive games that Nebraska has lost against ranked competitions, I think there's more relevance to that, because whether Illinois deserves to be ranked or not, and the Illini jumped in at number 24 in the AP poll last week, or this week, it was Sunday when that came out. That thing creates kind of a feel around this game that players in the locker room for Nebraska have experienced. So there's nobody in this locker room other than a few coaches who have experienced any of those ranked versus ranked games, or when Matt Rhule has coached against a ranked opponent. But there's players in this locker room who have played against ranked opponents for Nebraska and have been a part of that 0-24 streak, which I'm surprised, honestly, that's not getting more run. That's not getting more talk in this week here. Haven't heard a lot about the fact that it's been almost 8 years since Nebraska beat a ranked opponent. And maybe it's because Illinois is 24th and not 4th. And if Nebraska was playing Ohio State this week, it would be all about that. But, they just snuck in last week. I think it matters. I think it means something. I think until you win one of those games, until you win a few of those games and you get rid of that stigma, there's some carryover, even though this team has done a nice job of moving past a lot of the things that have plagued Nebraska football for the last several years. They're still just 3 games in, and I think that's a hurdle that this program, not just this team, but this Nebraska football program must clear.
Yeah, I think until you do it, you haven't done it, and so Nebraska does have an opportunity, I think, coming up tomorrow. Where now, like I said, it's not Ohio. Like you said, it's not Ohio State. It's not. It's not like Wisconsin, where they've owned you for the last decade. It's a different challenge. So with that being said, Illinois won the last 2 games that these 2 teams have played in Memorial Stadium, dating back to the disastrous 2020 COVID year game. That was, just horrendous. But that was now a long time ago. Another stat, I'll cherry pick this one out for you because I have some numbers on this. I was researching it this week. So Nebraska hasn't won a game against a ranked team as a ranked team in 13 years. That'd be since November 12th, 2011. There were some things going on that day when Nebraska played Penn State. And so they're 0 for their last 10. The last 10 times Nebraska has been a ranked team and they've played against a ranked team, they have not won those games. I'm looking at a list of them. The last time it happened was the 62-3 Ohio State game in 2016. And then obviously there was the week before that. There's a couple bowl games that were mixed in there. Nebraska is 2 out of their last 15 in these such games, 2 wins in their last 15 tries as a ranked team against a ranked team. And there are some brutal losses in here. These games, like 62-3 for an example, like maybe Ohio State's obviously really good. They were fantastic that year, and they were coached by Urban Meyer and that. And we found out about Nebraska in 2016, how maybe fake it was as they started 7-0 that year. But they were 17.5 point underdogs in that game. They lost by 59. They exploded. Tommy Armstrong got hurt, and he went
to the hospital.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. So
Nebraska went to the hospital that game.
The Melvin Gordon game is in here. Where Nebraska was up 17-3, and then they just imploded. So there's some things in there where you're like, oh boy, man, they've gotten to that point and completely fallen flat in their faces a lot.
Yeah, so some good news, some good positive vibes, good conversation there. Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will have some good news. Talk about some good news, some unexpected good news that occurred for Nebraska on Wednesday as practice continued ahead of the Friday meeting with Illinois. That's next after this.
All right, it's Tapper for the FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's a very important resource for you to have. Let's just say that around this time of year. It's America's #1 sportsbook. But right now, not only is it a great resource for you to have, it's made even better by the fact that now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with your YouTube TV base plan, if you're a YouTube TV user like me, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game, and all you need is that Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. What a sweet deal. I love sitting back on my couch, watching the NFL on Sundays. Why not have access to every single game, courtesy of the FanDuel Sportsbook? Head to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook today. That's, once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon.
And I want to tell you a little bit about Roy. If you've not heard of Roy, we've been talking about it this week, a sponsor of the show. It stands for Return on You. It is a new platform that lets you, the sports fan, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. Roy changes the game for fans, because when fans contribute to a successful campaign, they receive access to exclusive content from the athlete, such as their announcement decision, such as behind the scenes footage and other personal reflections of their journey to reach the top. All of it is available only to fans who support that athlete. So download Roy for iOS or Android, enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered in a sweepstakes to receive $5,000 cash. That's the referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 in cash. Visit Roy.com for more details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and into the game today with Roy.
All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Once again, you can get your questions in for our mailbag show tomorrow. We'll make predictions at Locked On NEB. You could tweet at us at lockedonneb@gmail.com. Subscribe to or tweet at us minus the gmail.com, of course. Subscribe to the YouTube, like the YouTube videos. We appreciate you guys growing that thing, helping us all season and preseason long. So you mentioned good news. Here it is. Micah Mazzccua, who was missing from Nebraska's game on Saturday against Northern Iowa, wasn't on the field, wasn't with the team. Matt Rhule addressed it a little bit on Monday and said, hey, he's working through some stuff right now, and he was not available on Saturday night, and he will not be available this coming Friday night. This is what he said on Monday. Then fast forward to Wednesday, where Matt Rhule speaks with the media for the final time. He's asked about Micah Mazzccua's availability, and he says he is indeed available. He will not start the game. Henry Lutovsky will start the game at guard. but Micah Mazzccua is available to play. And the way I read it, Mitch, he seemed to intimate that he will play in the game. So that is a welcome change for one of Nebraska's best offensive linemen this week.
Could be. He could play, yeah. I mean, I didn't necessarily read that much into it. I thought it was more of like a situation where if Lutovsky goes down or there's another injury on the line and they have to move some pieces around, then they'll go to Mazzccua. Because the question was about, hey, who's going to be your third offensive guard or who's going to be your backup backup right guard in this situation where Mazzccua is not available. And Rhule said, actually, let me rephrase that. I may have misspoken on Monday. He is available. This strikes me as a fluid situation. So
good way to put it.
Right. Mazzccua ran into some issues. Rhule has continued to say he's working through some things and they're trying to help him through whatever it is that he's trying to work through. And he's progressing. Like things are getting better for Micah Mazzccua to the point where, all right, you can play on Friday night, but he has not gotten to the place where he's earned back his starting job. Maybe that comes against Purdue. Maybe he gets on the field for a few reps this game. I don't know. It's good to see. It's a positive sign because this could still and certainly could have before what we heard on Wednesday. It could have gone a different direction. It could have gone a direction where
totally,
hey, he's got some things he's working through, and then a week later, he's not going to be with us for a while, and then you've kind of lost one of your top offensive linemen, a position where Nebraska can't afford to lose many players. The Huskers had a run of injuries on the offensive line last year. We saw what happened when they had a run of injuries at running back and at wide receiver. And they've been fortunate through 3 games this year where you've had some bumps and bruises. Jamari Butler missed the last game, but knock on wood, they've been healthy. And part of the reason they've been healthy is because they've been able to limit reps. So these things are all trending in a positive direction. And the Mazzccua news, it kind of bogged that down, I think, here in the past few days. So to get some insight into where this thing's going, it certainly looks like he's on his way back. And whether you see him out on the field with the offensive line against Illinois on Friday, it's pointing in a direction where he's going to be there against Purdue. And, moving forward when the schedule obviously gets even more difficult than this Friday when you get into October.
Totally. I absolutely could have gone a different way. And good to hear that he's back, at least in the short term, but a fluid situation is a good way to describe this one. Hey, let's talk about something that we haven't really touched on all week. It's a huge deal. Nebraska is going to have their 400th consecutive sellout, which is insane. I think it's something that we've taken for granted a lot over the years. It's nearly ended several times. But as we'll talk about here, I think it has some new juice, as it usually does when it gets new coaching staff and it starts to have some success. So we took you through some negative numbers on Nebraska against ranked teams. How about some positive numbers as it pertains to the sellout streak? So they've sold out every game, 400 straight home games since November 3rd, 1962. Now, that first game of the sellout streak, they lost to Missouri. But every milestone game, so 100, 200, 300, and then coming up is 400. So on the 100s, they have won. There was a Penn State win in 79 for 100. There was the Colorado win in 94, which was epic. Number 2 Colorado. That was the 200th consecutive sellout. And then the 55-0 Louisiana Lafayette shutout was sellout.
Memorable.
300. They had nice jerseys for that game. I remember that. Nebraska is 324-75 since then at home. So they're looking for their 325th win. That's a little over 80% during that long period of time. And so Nebraska is now playing. This will be their 89th. This is all from Keith Mann, by the way, in the Nebraska notes. Their 89th home game during the sellout streak against a ranked opponent, and Nebraska is 47-39 in those games. So they've taken care of business at home, and the fans have backed them up for many, many decades now.
As you can imagine, that 47-39 has taken a dip. It's taken a turn for the worse. Like
Yep.
Nebraska was 47 and something much lower before this 24 game streak against ranked opponents occurred. So it would be memorable, you might say fitting, for Nebraska to end that streak on this milestone night with 400 sells. It's a big deal. You know, I think a lot's been made of the sellout streak in recent years because it's had to be pushed along, and a couple of athletic directors have helped advance it and get it to this point. And if it wasn't for donors stepping in on a couple of occasions and Nebraska getting creative with the way that it sold tickets, it might be over and you'd be sitting here and we wouldn't be having this night. And I think it's great to see this season. As you mentioned, Connor, there's some new juice in this thing, and we're not having a sellout at number 400 where they had to find a way to sell tickets through creative measures. I mean, it's been fantastic to see some of the endeavors that Nebraska has used in recent years, like getting kids into the stadium who wouldn't otherwise have chances. But on this night, the tickets are, and you can still do that, but on this night, the tickets are at a premium. You can't get a ticket for $5 for this game. You're paying above face value. If you're going on the secondary market, it's an in-demand ticket. The stadium is going to be full, which hasn't been the case for every sellout. That's what you'd want to see when number 400 comes around.
Totally. I think that is an important point, because not only is it Nebraska's been able to, they've had some games during the sellout streak where, you know, there was around 50,000 people in the stands, but you look around and the great thing that you've seen, I think, in the first 3 games, Nebraska's home slate, all non-conference games, obviously one really big one against Colorado, it is full. Like, it is truly full.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the students are, I mean, to show up for that Northern Iowa game all the way back to the top in the 90 whatever row back there in the South Stadium, that's really cool. That's something that probably wouldn't have happened, you know, a couple years ago, or as this thing kind of waned a little bit over the last several years. So I think you have to credit them as well. They don't really, you know, they're going to sell out student tickets every year. But I think now it is full. It is shoulder to shoulder. They're spilling out into the aisles. And it'll look like that on Friday night. I think it'll be a really cool and unique environment for this weird game with special kind of you know, the special tag attached to it, the 400th consecutive sellout.
What do you think? We'll finish this conversation with this question. What do you think that they're going to do on Friday that we're not yet aware of? I mean, the drone show. Hey, last week the drones didn't make it up in the air, by the way. There was a frequency issue within the stadium, so it would have been unsafe to fly the drones. The drones may have crashed down. So you can't do that.
Have been good.
No. Assume they got that fixed. What other than the drones spelling out 400 in the sky, what do you think we see on Friday?
I imagine you'll see some logos. You know, whether it's on the field or, you know, one of the things that Nebraska has always done for these commemorative games is they've put you know, the cards in the east section over there, and people have held it up, like, so maybe something like that. It just to be able to get a great picture and hang it up in the press box in Memorial Stadium, and it stays up there forever. I would imagine we see some stuff like that. I don't think they're doing any special jerseys, although I'd love to see it. You know, they did them really well in 2009, but I think Nebraska is going to stick with their regular scarlet and cream on Friday night.
Yeah, Matt Rhule, not a huge fan of alternate jerseys, so he's more of a traditionalist, so I'm fine with that. But I think there'll be a couple surprises. Not sure what those are going to be, but that's why they're surprises. So, all right, after the break, when we come back, our keys to victory for Nebraska in its Big Ten opener. That's coming up. All right, college football fans, the season is here. We are 4 weeks in. On the baseball field, the pennant races are coming down to the wire. It is time to get excited about fall sports. And if you've got a game you want to see in person, Gametime will make that experience much easier. It is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. No more exciting time on the baseball diamonds around this country than right now. And Gametime makes tickets getting easier and faster because prices on the app go down the closer you get to first pitch. Whatever you want to do, whether it's concerts, Major League Baseball games, maybe it's a college football game. If it's a hot ticket, it is there on Gametime. I love that you can see flash deals. You can check out views from your seat. You can customize your spot in the stadium. You can also take the guesswork out of buying tickets. That is the point of Gametime. So download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, wrapping the Locked On Nebraska podcast on this Thursday. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer is alongside me from 1620 The Zone in Omaha. We mentioned on the Wednesday show that Nebraska volleyball had a huge night at the Devaney Center last night, and the Huskers made short work of number 2 Stanford. That was interesting to watch. Connor, I saw you. You got into the online action, going with the callback to the national championship a couple of years ago when Stanford had the blow dryer. Yes, those were blow dryers that they were pointing at Herbie Husker, the drawings. There were blow dryers in the Devaney last night, I heard. Awesome. So I don't know what was up with that, but obviously Nebraska fans remember losing to Stanford and getting mocked by the Cardinal in the Final Four. They had drawings in their locker room, if you're not familiar with this thing, and it got out on social media during the celebration. So Nebraska has now whooped Stanford in consecutive years in the regular season since that has happened. And last night was not even close. It was like the Montana State match from last weekend. It kind of looked like that. So over in like an hour and 45 minutes. When Nebraska volleyball, what we saw last night, when Nebraska volleyball is playing at its best, and some of this, I think, was Stanford being a little road weary. They just beat Wisconsin and Texas, who Nebraska, I think, probably feels are the teams that are most in their way to a national championship, despite some slip-ups from those teams early in the year. Stanford just got done beating those programs and then had to come to Lincoln. So maybe it wasn't the best Stanford, but it was the best Nebraska. And when the Huskers are playing like that, they're going to be tough to beat, no matter who's on the other side of the net.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And they're challenging themselves. the
Louisville this weekend.
Yeah, championship caliber volleyball teams don't stop. So that'll be fun to watch. But Nebraska's always going to be in the mix of one of the best 2, 3, 4, or 5 teams in the country, and they haven't done anything to sway us away from that so far.
Yeah. Hey, real quick before we get to our keys to the game, I've got a story up on The Athletic today that I'd encourage people to go check out on Jamal Banks, Nebraska's senior wide receiver, the transfer from Wake Forest. And we've heard Matt Rhule going all the way back early in the offseason talk about Jamal Banks and the things that he's done to improve this program off the field. So I sat down with Jamal and got to chat with his sister, Kiera, his older sister, who's a volleyball coach in Maryland and was a player at Bowie State, and his mom, Christy Martin, who just has an incredible story about raising Jamal and Jamal's 2 younger sisters in the Washington, D.C. area. And they went through a lot of hardships, homelessness, and that has shaped the person that Jamal Banks is at Nebraska today. He's got this giving spirit that teammates recognized immediately when he got to Lincoln, and the people around Lincoln who've encountered Jamal have certainly experienced in the last 8 or 9 months. He's added something to this Nebraska football program that goes way beyond the field, and Rhule is very much on board with recognizing that. So exciting to get to tell a little bit of their story today in The Athletic. I'll put the link to that in the episode notes today. So go check that out.
It's a great story. I just got done reading it before we started this podcast today. And like the thing about Jamal is he, like you said, he's added something. I mean, he has stood out as a leader so far to immediately like be one of those guys selected by his teammates as a captain, as a single digit number.
Right.
There's a quote in here from his mom about how many statistics he's beaten or they've beaten as a family. It's really cool. Sometimes you just see guys like that kind of just surviving and making it he's thriving, which is really awesome to see. So yeah, I would encourage people to go check that out. Great job, Mitch.
Thanks. All right, so Friday night, 7 p.m., Fox, national TV, tons of eyes on Nebraska football. Everybody's tuning in to see Dylan Raiola. They're on the promos on other Fox programming. So this is what, 2 weeks out of 4 on like the big national spotlight, under the big national spotlight for Nebraska. What an opportunity for the Nebraska program. But they've got to perform. They've got to win. If people are going to tune in and they're going to see that environment, they're going to be impressed with Memorial Stadium and what's going on around the 400 sellout. Ultimately, it comes down to what Nebraska can do on the field. What to you, Connor, what matchup, what storyline are you following as the most important key in this game?
Well, I think it's a program that stands out to you as like, man, they've had these really good, tough running backs. And, we remember Chase Brown from a couple years ago. He's a really good player. He's with the Cincinnati Bengals now. Like, he's going to be in the NFL for a long time. And it's a program that sort of built itself on like this physicality now, coming over from the Lovie Smith era, and Brett Bielema has sort of continued it. They have not run the ball well this year. And so they have a couple really good receivers in Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Those guys are good players. I imagine if Nebraska can shut down that first valve of stopping the run, they get pretty dependent on the pass. So then I think it becomes a pass rush situation for Nebraska against Altmaier, and they're going to try and get it to those receivers quickly. So don't let them get anything going on the ground to kind of open things up for their pass game. As usual, I think the key here is Nebraska's defense, doing their thing in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go a different direction, and I'm going to point to special teams. And we heard from Ed Foley this week on the network radio show talk about how the offense and the defense are approaching championship level football. He feels that way from his vantage point. And he said the special teams has not been at that level. And there's pressure on him, and there's pressure on the players who contribute to special teams, which is primarily a lot of offensive and defensive guys. Of course, the specialists are neither, but they feel the pressure to step up and play at the level that you see offensively and defensively. And Nebraska hasn't needed that, frankly, in the first 3 games of the year. They're going to need it. They're going to need it at some point. And maybe it's Friday night. I'm going to say that there's some things that happen in special teams in this game that are going to shape the way it goes. And Nebraska could win the game for sure without getting a championship level special teams performance, but they better step up and be ready to play that kind of football in the third phase in this game and in games that are coming up down the road. That to me is I have a feeling that there's going to be something that happens, good or bad, that shapes this game for Nebraska in the kicking phase.
Well, you add in, I'm not a weather warrior, Mitch. People are very worried about the weather this week.
Looks like it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to rain on Saturday.
But if you add in a little bit of moisture into the situation, that probably doesn't bode well for special teams either. So Nebraska has operated these first 3 games at a deficit in special teams. They need to be at least even, I think, in this one. And eventually they need to get to the point where it's a positive for them, but they're clearly not quite there yet.
Yeah, Matt Rhule got asked about the weather on Wednesday, and I thought it was a shout out from the person who asked the question to Deion Sanders refusing to talk about the weather, or how about we practice in things that we know are going to happen. Rhule said Nebraska gets plenty of practice in the weather throughout the season. This is why Nebraska wants to practice outside. Why you see them in the spring practicing outside in the rain when they've got this nice big building that they can go in, because they want to be in the elements. So if it rains on Friday night, Nebraska will have practiced in that at some point in recent months. So shouldn't be a big issue, and both teams have to play in it. So, all right, that's it for us on this Thursday. We'll be back on Friday. Send us your mailbag questions. We will have our predictions. We'll go over how last week went and get you ready for the 7 p.m. kickoff. I want to thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football. That podcast with Spencer McLaughlin has everything you need to get through week 4 of an exciting football season. You can find the link for Locked On College Football in the description of this show, so you don't need to search. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.